It's good to be joining you for Christmas Eve. This is my favourite day in the year. It's all to do with when I was a child and the anticipation of what was about to happen the next day. It wasn't particularly to do with the birth of Christ, although of course it has been now for a long time. I love Christmas. I realise that not everyone does. Work was, for example, George Mason's life. One December, he refused invitations from family inviting him to Christmas dinner. On the 24th of December, he put in his typical 12-hour day at the office, and after most of the employees had left work, he walked into the back of his huge office vault. The vault suddenly got dark. He heard a click and realised that the massive door had been closed securely behind him. An employee had accidentally shut him in. Standing in the darkness, he pounded on the door and he yelled out. But everyone had left. He remembered that there was a safety hole built into the vault to allow for an air supply, so he sat down on the floor to wait. That night and Christmas Day slowly passed. Finally, the day after Christmas, the chief cashier arrived and unlocked the vault, but didn't open the door, but headed back to his desk. Without being seen, George staggered out and tottered to the water fountain to satisfy his terrible thirst. Then he went home to freshen up and eat. Returning to the office, he discovered that he hadn't been missed. Pondering the way he was wasting his life on things that didn't really matter, he wrote on a card, "To love people, to be indispensable somewhere. That is what is truly important. That is the secret of happiness. Beware of the barrenness of a busy life." He taped the card to the inside wall of the vault. Now, George Mason's experience was dramatic. But he was not the first nor the last person to miss Christmas. The Bible records that several individuals were totally unaware of the true meaning of Jesus' birth. Referring to Jesus' coming, John wrote, "He came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him." And when Jesus was born, several people didn't receive him. Several people missed experiencing this great event. I want us to see in these next few moments what we can learn from those people who were oblivious to the birth of God's Son, so we don't repeat their errors. 3 types of people missed Christmas when Jesus was born. One was preoccupied, one was paranoid, and the last group were passive. Now look at the preoccupied businessman. We talk about the innkeeper who turned Mary and Joseph away. The Bible doesn't mention an innkeeper, it just mentions an inn. I get the impression that there were several inns in the area that were full that night, every room occupied by people just like Joseph and Mary, who travelled to Bethlehem for the Roman census. Bethlehem was the city of King David, so his every living descendant would have been there, and this little village was just bulging. Mary could have been 15 years old. The journey was 90 miles by foot, no mention of an animal to ride on. Maybe, maybe not, but the hills were steep, so they probably made 20 miles a day. So that's at least a week of walking and bringing their own food. Mary and Joseph probably encountered numerous no vacancy signs that night. The best place Joseph could find for Mary to give birth was in a stable, which was likely a cave in the side of a hill used to keep livestock. So there were probably numerous innkeepers who missed taking part in the first Christmas. And not only did they not give them a room, apparently, they didn't even call for anyone to help Mary. Mary gave birth to her firstborn son, and she wrapped him in cloths. Notice that she did it. And she laid him in a manger. A manger was a stone animal feeding trough. No midwives are mentioned and no one to assist Mary. The Bible doesn't even say that Joseph was present. I'm sure that he was. But if he was typical of the way most men act at their first birth experience, he may have been very little help to Mary. I'm reminded of the husband phoning the hospital in a panic and saying, "She's giving birth, she's giving birth." Asked, "Is this her first child?" He replied, "No, it's her husband." Mary was basically on her own. And this wasn't typical in Israel. The Jews were not barbaric people who sent their women off into the jungle to have their babies alone on a banana leaf. It would have been highly unusual for a young woman to give birth alone, yet due to the busyness of those days, that happened. So, these innkeepers might have helped but didn't. And in making this choice, they missed Christmas. The Son of God was born right under their noses, but in their preoccupation, they were oblivious to it all. The Bible doesn't indicate that they were hostile or unsympathetic, but in their hectic lives, it became a question of priority. They didn't fight to keep Jesus out, neither did they vote him out. They just crowded him out. And our world is filled with innkeepers. Do you know what I mean? There's no time to think about a baby. We have an English word, bedlam. It comes from the word Bethlehem. In the 1500s, there was a hospital in London called St. Mary's of Bethlehem. It was for the mentally insane. And for a modest fee, people would go to heckle the inmates. It was entertainment. The title St. Mary's of Bethlehem became shortened to Bethlehem and then pronounced in English Cockney, Bedlam. At Bethlehem, the Prince of Peace was born. At Bedlam, it was chaos and confusion. My question is this: is our life Bethlehem or Bedlam? Is it Bethlehem because we're welcoming Jesus into our lives, or is it Bedlam because we're confused about the meaning of our lives, and in some ways they are chaotic because we have no good purpose for our existence? A student said, "My Christmas plans will consist of eating, sleeping, drinking, and constant anxiety." More people have nervous breakdowns at Christmas than at any other time of the year. We run ourselves ragged in this season and tragically miss out on much of the quiet joy God intended us to experience as we celebrate the birth of his Son. But the real tragedy is that this busy lifestyle is not just at Christmas. Our days are consumed with activity, not necessarily bad activity, just things that keep us constantly busy. Medical researchers say that one of the greatest cures for stress is for people to learn to stop and take deep breaths several times a day. Apparently, breathing deeply releases relaxing agents into our bloodstream, and this isn't happening in many people because we rush around so much that we never stop to relax and breathe correctly. A man said, "I used to suffer from depression, but through hard work, persistence, and never giving up, I now suffer from anxiety and depression." We don't make the time to stop, think, pray, and enjoy a relationship with God that Christmas made possible. Emmanuel means God with us. But we just don't have the leisure to enjoy that amazing blessing. The experience of the innkeepers of that first Christmas teaches us all to slow down. Be sensitive enough to hear God knocking on our heart's door and open it and make room for him in our daily lives. Wallace, a 9-year-old boy, was big for his age. He was a little slower mentally than his schoolmates. The director of the Christmas play thought that because of his size, he would make the innkeeper's refusal of lodging to Joseph and Mary dramatic and forceful. On the night of the performance, he watched the Christmas story unfold. At his cue, he took his place behind the wooden door that was part of the backdrop. Joseph with Mary appeared before the door and knocked. Wallace, the innkeeper, opened the door and spoke in a loud, gruff voice. "What do you want?" "We seek lodging," replied Joseph. "Seek it elsewhere. The inn is filled." Joseph begged, "Please, good innkeeper, this is my wife, Mary, and she's going to have a baby soon. Surely you must have some place for her to rest." Well, there was an embarrassingly long pause. The prompter whispered his cue. "No, be gone." Wallace repeated, but without feeling. "No, be gone." Then Joseph put his arm around Mary as they turned wearily away. Then something happened which made this Christmas pageant different from the rest. Wallace's eyes filled with tears, and he cried out to Joseph and Mary, Wait, don't go. You can have my room." Some felt the Christmas play was ruined, but most thought it was the best Christmas pageant ever. You know, life is not life as it was intended to be if we rush around so much that we don't have a place in our lives for our Creator and Redeemer. Life is a facade if it speeds past the lasting in pursuit of the transient. Don't let that happen. Don't be an innkeeper. Slow down. Experience the presence of God in your life. Innkeepers miss Christmas because they are preoccupied. And another individual who missed the first Christmas was a politician. Although Herod ruled Israel, he wasn't a proper Jew. He wasn't a king either. His father had done some favours for Rome, and as a payment, the Herod family was given the right to rule Judea, which was under Roman occupation. Herod was a consummate politician and very evil man. His entire life was one of plotting and execution, even within his own family. In one of the final acts of his evil life, he had the most distinguished citizens of Jerusalem put in prison and commanded that they be slaughtered the moment he died. He explained, "The people will not weep when I die, and I want them weeping, even if they weep over someone else." Do you see how all this helps us understand Herod's response to the announcement by the wise men that a baby had been born who would be the genuine king of the Jews? Herod ordered all male children, 2 years old and younger, killed in Bethlehem. Herod failed in killing the Christ child because Joseph and Mary had taken Jesus and fled to Egypt. So Herod missed Christmas. I'm sorry to say there are Herod types today. There are still people who won't allow anything, even God, to interfere with their plans or lifestyle. They're not about to let someone else be king of their lives. Oh no, these days people don't mind taking time off work to commemorate Jesus' birth. They will even embrace him as a resource when they get in trouble. They might even be willing to call themselves Christians, but not if he insists on being king. They won't come to Christ if he threatens to cramp their style. They will not accept his right to rule over them. They want to run the show. And it's easy to point the finger at others for this kind of behavior, but we often make the same mistake. We say so easily, Jesus is Lord, but he is not really. There are parts of our lives that we partition off from his presence and reign. This is tragic because we really can't experience the joy of the Christian life unless we commit to following Jesus as Lord of all our lives. He is Lord of all, or he is not Lord at all. To experience the joy of the presence of Christ, the full benefit of his loving guidance made possible because of Christmas, we must allow his reign to extend to every area of our lives, our work, our marriage, our leisure time, all of it. In a cathedral, there was a large, magnificent pipe organ. It was a Saturday afternoon, and the custodian was making one final check of the choir and organ loft high in the balcony. And he saw a man coming toward him. And the man asked to play the organ. There was no way he was going to get permission, but very pleasantly, he did keep asking. And there was something about the man that led the custodian to allow it. Suddenly, the cathedral was filled with the most beautiful music the custodian had ever heard in all his years in that place. Then, in what seemed all too short a time, the stranger stopped playing and slid off the organ bench and started down the stairway. "Wait!" cried the custodian. "That was the most beautiful music I have ever heard in the cathedral. Who are you?" The stranger turned for just a moment as he replied, "Mendelssohn." He was none other than Felix Mendelssohn, one of the greatest organists and composers of the 19th century. Later the man said, "I almost kept the master from playing his music in my cathedral." And each of us has the opportunity to have a personal, day-by-day relationship with the master of the universe, Jesus Christ. He wants to live in and through us, enabling us to do wonderful things in his kingdom. All we have to do is yield to his rule. When we give him total control of our days. As it says in the Psalms, our lives will make music to the Lord. But he must be Lord. He must be able to be kinging it over us. So the innkeepers missed Christmas. Herod missed it. But one last group did as well, and it's astounding to me. I mean, if you made a list of the people who would seem least likely to miss the coming of Christ, at the top of the list would be these men. And in case you haven't guessed, I'm referring to the religious leaders of the day. Herod gathered together all the chief priests and scribes of the people and inquired of them where the Christ was to be born. And they said to him, in Bethlehem of Judea, for so it has been written by the prophet, and you, Bethlehem, land of Judah, are by no means least among the leaders of Judah, for out of you shall come forth a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel. That is shocking. Those religious leaders knew exactly where Christ was to be born. They knew Micah the prophet by memory. The Messiah would be born in Bethlehem. Yet they missed Christmas. How is that possible? They were passive believers. Why not check it out? At least send one person. Bethlehem is only 5 miles from Jerusalem. These religious leaders were so busy in the religious ritual in Jerusalem that they missed the reality of what had happened that night and today. Religious people can be the hardest to reach with the good news of Christmas. If we are not careful, our faithful religious activity can become a replacement for a genuine relationship with God. We can get inoculated with a mild form of religion, becoming immune from the real thing. We may live in a house with a shower and plenty of soap, but stay dirty if we just do not apply that soap to our lives. We can be involved in the church and yet still miss it, even though we maybe know the preacher's next point before he gets to it, because we're not applying it. Religion can be a deadly trap. The message of Christmas is that God loved us so much that he wanted a relationship with each of us. He doesn't want our religion unless it helps that relationship to grow. So here's a question for us. Do we have a passion for God? Is church going something we do, especially at this time of the year? There comes a time for every one of us to take a checkup. Do I know stuff about God, stuff from the Bible? Or do I know God through the stuff I know? There was no room in the inn. There was no room in the court. And there was no room in the religious systems. And it's still the same today. On December the 17th, 1903, Orville and Wilbur Wright made their first flight of an aeroplane, a 12-second flight. They sent the following message to their sister: "We have flown for 12 seconds. We will be home for Christmas." Catherine went to the newspaper office and told the editor of her brother's new flying machine and informed him that they would be home for Christmas. On December 19, the local paper placed the following headline on the 6th page of the paper: "Wright brothers home for Christmas." The most important story of the year, man's first flight, and the editor missed it. I wonder if the same could be said about us when it comes to Christmas. Look all around us. The trees are decorated. The music is festive. It's Christmas. Don't miss it. Listen to this glorious promise about Jesus. All who received him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become the children of God. This is big news. Don't miss your right. A right that's been won for us because his blood was shed, that we might be a forgiven, saved people. A people who could know peace with God, a people who could experience his power in our lives, a people who can have his purpose about our lives, which can smash and crash its way through time into eternity. Don't miss this. Find Christmas today. And the way you find Christmas is when you focus on Jesus and you receive him as Saviour and Lord.